Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay.
You're okay?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always okay these days because if I'm not, I'm going to go down a road of sadness and gloom.
There is no sadness today. There is no, well, I was going to say there's no joy in Mudville, but that's from Casey at the Bat. Do you know what Casey at the Bat is?
Here we go again. For those longtime listeners, you know what I mean.
Right. Well, the producer of the show early during pre-production actually referred to me as a boomer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's getting a little too comfortable.
What is the age range of a boomer?
I don't know.
Should we Google it?
This is no. We're definitely not Googling.
Did that make me not a boomer by saying
that? Well,
that?
it certainly makes you a non-boomer to suggest that Google is the solution. I have this conversation with my kids all the time.
Google knows everything.
In my mind, boomer represents someone much older than I, which is not me. But to them, I am in that category. I don't know exactly how that started.
Wait, that's a weird dynamic for you because you're being called a boomer and you're like, whoa, I call people older than me boomers.
Correct. And I believe way back when, it might even been the first time that they heard that reference. And now I'm saying to myself, did I actually start it all? Is it people of my generation that we're referring to perhaps 65 plus as boomers?
Is that how old you are?
the younger folk just kind of lopped onto it.
I know exactly what you're thinking because Gen Z is the generation below me who I'm just like, oh, Gen Z. And then I sometimes get called Gen Z and I'm like, whoa. I am not Gen Z. So I get it.
You take offense, right?
Yeah, it's like it's funny because you're taking offense of being older and I'm taking offense of being younger.
Well, hold on. I'm not taking offense of being older. I'm taking offense of being labeled. I'm okay with my age, but that's for another story.
Yeah, let's not open that can of worms.
We are going to discuss today something that actually, as it relates to head game topics, is probably the most organic. And why I bring that up is because this topic today, physical versus mental training, or the value of repetition, mind versus body, really started in our lab discussion during a staff meeting earlier this week between you and I. And you brought up the very question of, does mental fatigue have a ceiling? And then we kind of really started getting after it, and we were ripping back and forth.
We keep going back and forth with balance all the time, and I hate using balance as like an answer because it's like such a normal it's like, oh, the balance, but training your mind as well as training your body, I feel like they go hand in hand.
They do, but I want to be clear just for our discussion purposes. I'm not asking you to choose or pick sides, but I think it's important to sort of identify what has been established as it relates to, let's just call it training mechanisms in general. When you refer to any athlete and you use the word training, 9 out of 10 times still, even in 2020, you're referring to physical.
Right.
You're thinking about getting stronger. You're thinking about getting faster. That human development that is more traditional. But as we at Mindful Athlete Training work with college, pro organizations, administrators, decision makers, the mental training is growing. It's gathering more momentum. So I think what we should try to do is better decipher, if there's one that's certainly better than the other, how do we celebrate that? And then how do we continue to promote that?
Right. It's also for me, and I think, and it's like, we are so young still in understanding the mind, and I don't know if we're ever going to understand the brain. So it could just be that we have been raised to think that practicing physically is the best route. And now the new thing is the mind, which might actually be the answer, but we're just not used to it yet or comfortable with it yet. So the information and the research we have just doesn't back it up yet, even though, obviously that's not necessarily all true because we have great research now.
I think physical training is simpler because it's more of the norm. And I think it relates to human behavior in general. I think physical training has been woven into the fabric of athleticism, your level of preparation, and it often reflects your commitment to how good you want to become. It doesn't mean that mental training isn't as effective. It certainly doesn't mean it's not as readily available, because more and more mental skills training programs, performance coaches are popping up. Mm-hmm. I think, though, the biggest hurdle is people gravitate to what they know. They just do. You wake up and there's value in meditation. There's value in a mindful practice. There's value in exploring your language and trying to be as positive as possible, but it doesn't come organically. Mm-hmm. It's real easy to roll out of bed, throw on your jogging sneakers, and go for a run.
Right. What makes me think of, too, is I think we're also kind of encompassing the Western culture. Whereas...
Excellent point.
Yeah, when you think of the Eastern culture, and I think of like the Han dynasties and like things like that, they really encompassed not only training your mind, but your body as well. And I guess I'm trying to line where the heck my head was at, but I feel like I'm coming full circle with my first statement that, maybe it's just they've been around for thousands of years. And they understand that how important your brain is. They understand, I should rephrase that, how important mindfulness is and understanding internally rather than externally. But now they also know the importance of both of that.
Right. I think that we've spoken a couple of times before, the newness. Think about the United States of America. Think about our adolescence as it relates to other countries on the globe, on the planet, thousands of years versus hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. So when you think about that philosophy, Western versus Eastern, and how we start to adapt over time, what it is that's in our best interests, I think we're pretty slow on the uptick as
Definitely.
Americans. So what's been available through perhaps breathing practices, we've joked about the Tibetan monks, of how they're slowing down their physiology. More and more podcasts are highlighting experts in respiration, neuroscience. They're talking more aggressively about what we refer to as the variables that holistically aid in performance. They are discussing those individual pieces, but this lends itself to a question that I have for you. If physical training is something that's become more of the norm, and we quickly recognize that you can overtrain, you can physically exert, that can lend itself to fatigue, injury, poor performance. Is there ever a time where mental training could be done too much or too often to the detriment of the athlete, of the performer, we'll say?
This is such a loaded question, I feel like, because there's so many different angles, obviously. But right off the bat, I think if you're doing it correctly, meaning if you have done your research, if you're working with somebody like a psychologist, like a sports psychologist in particular, I don't think it's possible that there's a ceiling to strengthening your mind. I just don't think it is, because you're the whole premise of strengthening your mind is to be able to get through certain things that would make you uncomfortable, make you tired, if you get what I'm saying.
I do, but if there's no ceiling to how well you can develop your mind, to your earlier question from a couple of days ago, does mental fatigue have a ceiling? Is there a limit where just a few months ago, we talked about tapping out. We talked about hitting our threshold. This global experiment that we still continue to go through as human beings. It's end of July. August is next week. PIAA, because I'm in touch with that, just announced that all fall sports will be fanless in the state of Pennsylvania. There are parents that are outraged, that are asking why our beloved Dr. Fauci can throw out the first pitch in a
Right.
Washington Nationals game and then go sit in the stands with his family
Yeah.
side by side without a mask to watch the Nationals play. But we as parents can't go watch our children play, possibly, in many cases, their last year of competitive sports at the high school level.
Yeah.
Right? So if you think about how we're tested, how we're endured, why this morning I came in with a general sense of upset with the world, me trying to again find something deeper to keep me motivated, to keep my eye on the prize, to stay positive. All of those things that are very important to me as a private business owner, but yet as a human being, the mental fatigue continues to rise, which, as we have explained through our holistic performance theory, as mental fatigue goes up, my effort comes down. So if mental fatigue is relevant, is it limitless?
Question.
Yeah.
Because I think we're gonna get to the bottom, maybe not the bottom of this in particular question, but how do you combat that? Like this morning, you said you were just upset at the world, but then you also know, like, you have a lot of knowledge in your head. I do believe that.
Thank you.
With all of your research and your titles. So how do you combat that?
The best I can.
Meaning?
It's the simplest answer. I try to keep it real. I try to be human. I bring attention to it. I say it out loud. I share it with coworkers and families and peers. I sort of put the spotlight on myself. It just does two things. One, it aids me therapeutically because it allows me to talk about it in front of people in a safer format. And the other thing that I do is it allows me to model for other people, perhaps how they, if they can softly recognize what I'm going through. And it might, sometimes it's not even a word, it's a gentle head nod of agreement, like, yeah, I get it. Then that makes me feel better because perhaps it's helping someone else. And that kind of allows me to sort of revisit full circle what I do for a living, my intention to assist humankind, things like that. So one, it makes me feel better. I release the pressure valve. But two, then it sort of brings me holistically full circle in what I do.
Right. So it's interesting that you said holistically, because holistically speaking, that is everything from your mind and your body.
Yes. Yes.
And I really would like to, like, I think for the next half of the show, we should just play devil's advocate, and you take training mind and I'll take training bodies.
I'll just take mind. You want me to take mind?
Well,
Or you want me to take body?
I feel like
What's
body's harder. I want to be challenged.
So you want body because it's harder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
I'm fine
like
with that.
training the mind, it's the top of your head. You know, it's right here.
It is, but it's harder to establish. It's hard to express, because especially for the common, average, ordinary Joe or Jane, because it's not what they eat, sleep, and breathe. It's not what they do every day. And I think that bodes to the challenge that we as performance experts have that specialize in mental skills training.
Yeah. You know what I've been coming to the conclusion of, too, which is interesting. And I think we're going to play a clip from this person. But David Goggins is somebody who...
Many times we've talked about him.
Yeah, he's definitely one of a kind. And I think it's because of... He may or may not have understood what he's doing, but he's doing very sophisticated things to his brain, like every day.
Yes.
And so mentally, he's training the mind, but physically, he's putting the reps in. I think that's like what I mean with like the holistic, like it takes the thought first, but then you actually have to do it. which I guess we can all argue that it's still your mind, but
It is, but I think what you're speaking to is the value of repetition.
yeah.
And I used to have this argument with Dr. Megger, our biofeedback director, years ago when we got started on radio. Is it all about the reps as it relates to competency, performance, regulation? Is it just a matter of time if you're putting in the reps? And a lot of people would say yes on both sides of the coin, the physical and the mental.
Would you say no?
I think that repetition has something to do with it, yes. I wouldn't say it's the brass key, the brass ring that you're should be constantly stretching for. There's something about, as we have discussed through our holistic performance theory, something we call deliberate practice. So it's really how you're going about the repetitions. It's not just about the
Interesting.
numbers, right?
That's interesting because when I'm thinking of, okay, so reps meaning that you're like, now we're getting into neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
But for what you said, it almost compensates for the reps by working smarter, not harder.
Yes, and it's challenging the 10,000 hour rule,
Right.
which is getting you to expert status sooner, because the quality reps. So
Right.
deliberate practice is loosely referred to as quality practice or quality reps.
Which I
Right.
feel like everyone would strive for.
I think everyone, when it's brought to their attention, would strive for it. I don't think there's a lot of people out there that really are in touch with how they can deliberately practice with micro goals under the overarching goal of getting better. It's really a more organized approach to how you train. There are a lot of people who will, if they can benefit from using a trainer, if it's within their resources to have available to afford it, sometimes they get it from coaches. Those more curtailed performance experts, those personal trainers, are helping them deliberately practice with greater purpose. But I don't think it's a natural skill that a lot of people have.
It's you said natural and my mind went right to nature versus nurture. So what if you have somebody who is more their predisposition isn't necessarily I'm going to motivate myself. How would you get them in here to be the best optimal version of themselves when they don't even know how to get themselves there?
Well, I think the first thing that I would do is try to work with them on their insight, because, and this goes to another element of our holistic performance model, which is raw talent or natural skills, and what role that plays in someone's ability to perform while enduring a level of fatigue. So educating the athlete, someone who is more naturally talented is not going to be as invested as practicing with deliberate purpose. It doesn't make them a bad person.
Yeah.
It's just something that they wouldn't have to consider, because naturally they pull upon their repertoire of skills in the moment and they make things happen. And then they get branded as the natural talent. They get
Right.
branded as the pure athlete.
It makes me think of why when you have these greats of athletes, it's because they're almost like, and you can put in quotes, like sick in the mind, because they have the raw talent and skill, but they know how to put the deliberate reps in, or they want to at least.
Yes, I think they see more value
Yeah.
in investing how they better themselves through deliberate practice, through better reps. It's almost an AEI, an athletic emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
right? Where you're seeing the value of doing something a little bit differently, and you weave it into your game.
Yeah, I'm thinking of right now. Well, I'm not going to even go there. I want to kind of move it into a little bit. So last night, the NBA played their first official season of 2020. No,
Yes.
2020 in the bubble. Talk about the mental aspects. How important Well, like I can't even just. You're laughing. You get what I'm trying to put out
I
here.
do.
Like,
I think I know where you're
seeing
going. Yeah.
virtual fans, but they're real people. They're just on a screen.
I didn't see the actual fans yet. I've seen a lot of those practice games where they have the advertisements, and I read that they're playing the same music for each team as like the Lakers are coming up the court to make them feel like they're at home. And I assume they're doing that for the other team. So they're making all of these accommodations. But I think it speaks larger to if we, as athletes, are constantly seeking balance, because we know balance leads to optimal gain and best performance. But yet the ideal scenario is not available.
Right.
What does that force the athlete to consider?
Themselves. They have to look. I feel like they have to look more internally now. Now it's like, okay, how was, I think you get really caught up in the moment, which isn't a bad thing. I actually was arguing this last night. Like, someone asked, how is playoffs going to change? Because we've talked about how important fans are for momentum. And I was arguing back, just to play devil's advocate, that I think that the two teams at one point, it is just them versus the other team, and the fans kind of go away because of how competitive it gets, because of the internal motivation. Like, to be a professional athlete, I believe that you have everything that we were talking about right before this conversation, if you get what I'm saying.
I do.
You don't look like you necessarily agree exactly.
No. That's I've been told that when I'm in a deep level of concentration, my eyebrows tend to go down, which
So
may
you're looking angry at me.
which may appear as if I am disapproving. I'm just really focused on what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm trying to break it apart, because we're going to be looking at this season technically from a bird's eye view now. So I'm just interested in it in general. Like,
Right.
What's his name? Zion Williamson.
Yes. Williamson. Yes.
I
Zion.
always
You
never
like
finish.
to call him Williams.
I do.
You do. It's okay.
He came out and said it's the best. It's like the most elite players ever playing in an AAU tournament. That's what this bubble's like.
That's exactly, and I think that that's a spot-on evaluation. But to speak to your point, which I think we can revisit after our quick break that's coming up, what's being asked of these NBA players is not only a testament to the value of mental skills, but it's really going to put a spotlight on what we do for a living. Because don't think I'm going to let you forget that Ben Simmons worked with a sports psychologist.
Came out and said it himself.
During the quarantine.
Yeah.
He came out and he had some words. And that's something that we're definitely going to take a look at. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to listen to our sponsors, Dr. Lee Pick, Chess Ferdinand. We'll be right back.
We don't want to suffer. We don't want to feel discomfort. So the whole time we're living our lives in a very comfortable area. There's no growth in that. So for me, I realized that. The reason I became 297 pounds is because that was comfortable. What was very uncomfortable was running. What was very uncomfortable was being on a diet. What was very uncomfortable was trying to face things that I didn't want to face. And I also realized when I was really big, I had no growth. Why? Because I was living comfortable. So I realized for me to find growth, I had to face all of these different things that made me very, very uncomfortable.
David Goggins, he's the human highlight reel as it relates to what we've been calling for a while now, holistic performance and integration of mind and body. When you hear his story, first of all, for anyone who doesn't know who he is, he's an African-American former Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, cut like glass. And when you hear him talk about being 297 pounds, I just kind of chuckle. This is where my head went to. This is my boomer moment. This is for our producer, Michael. I thought of the animated movie WALL-E. Are either you or anyone that is remotely your age familiar with WALL-E?
Of course.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think I've seen it.
Michael just gave me the high sign that he's trying to get back on my good list.
Right. He's like, yeah, well.
Yeah, man, I can relate to WALL-E, man. What, boomer? What? So there's a portion of WALL-E where it's about a robot. He gets separated. It's actually a love story, but it's very well done. And there's a portion of it where human beings have destroyed Mother Earth, and they have moved to outer space, living on this, imagine a cruise ship that can hold hundreds of thousands of people that's in outer space. And everyone has gotten so out of shape that they are no longer capable of walking, and they are moving around on floating elevated lounge chairs. It really speaks to the projection of where humankind could very easily go when you think about obesity in the United States.
Right.
And now with the quarantine and video game usage being through the roof, and social media platforms and the TikToks and the very late nights, more parents are calling our practice for clinical reasons because their children are rebelling. Their personalities are changing. They're not abiding by structure. They don't want to go back to school. They're keeping their fingers crossed that we stay cyber. Wally is the exclamation point of the human race de-evolving. And why I think that's so relevant when you hear someone like David Goggins talking about the whole point of our lives is to strive for comfort. It's
Right.
so incredibly simple, yet spot on accurate. Of what he is speaking of is the whole pursuit, the meaning of life, should I say, the pursuit of happiness. Always, when you look at it stereotypically, what does it encompass? A comfortable home, a comfortable place to sit, put up your feet, an 80-inch flat screen TV with a voice activating remote. Because, using your fingers now, that's not cool. That's way too much exertion. You should just be able to talk into it. And it's all under the guise of technology. You think about communication. You think about how our children are evolving and developing. It's all about finding comfort as soon as possible and maintaining it. And then you have someone like David Goggins that's talking about his ongoing perpetual search for discomfort. This is a gentleman who engages in mega marathons that are typically run by teams of 6 to 8 people. That's a marathon a day for everyone else out there who doesn't do that. David Goggins joins these races and runs them alone.
Yep.
He doesn't believe that he's reached his threshold until bones in his feet start to break. He believes that pushing himself beyond physical limitation is the only way to unlock the power of the mind. So here we sit talking about training our bodies, training our mind. I think you said earlier that, you wanted to take the stance that mental training is more or less difficult.
Mental training is more difficult than physical training.
Okay, so using David Goggins and some of the things that I just spoke of, what's your opening remark on that?
So mentally, what he's doing, and why I think he actually is the pursuit of happiness in my eyes, because the purpose of life, I think, and I could be wrong, and this is just my opinion, and maybe it's also, that's what life is. People find what they're comfortable with. But for me, when I see him, I'm feeling like he's actually truly happy, because he has figured out this part of his mind that he knows if he just keeps pushing it, he can continue to grow. And in his eyes, growing is doing things that are uncomfortable, things that scare him. And then clinically speaking, and just by habit, we avoid things that are afraid of us, which actually prohibit our growth and make us not get to where we were supposed to be in life. Of course, I'm putting that in quotes. But I feel like what I'm trying to say is, I think what he's doing, I think his equation, since we like to think in equations, would be training the body plus training the mind plus being uncomfortable equals growth. That, to me, is David Goggins.
Okay. And to just speak to the other side of that coin, I'm now going to go after the physical side of training and why that might be more complicated for some. This is the key difference. Physical training for people who genuinely need it are not the same type of individuals who have the psychological hurdles associated with people who seek physical training because they want it. And I think that's the key difference. When you consider if someone has been struggling with depression, anxiety, as it relates to their physical appearance, whether it began in their childhood, whether it stemmed from poor parenting, a sense of low self-worth, low self-esteem, their physical appearance is being judged by the world all the time, even when they don't want it. Because when they sit down at the end of the day after feeling judged for being overweight, for being in bad condition, for not falling into that normative sample, they watch a commercial and they see someone who's in perfect physical condition, reinforcing what happiness looks like. Mm-hmm. Whereas the mental training may be more difficult, but it can be done softly. It can be done subtly. It can be done between the ears. The physical training, you got to get out there. You have to join a gym. You have to walk around the block. You have to be able to bear discomfort of other people putting their eyes on you when you're working on physical training. Let's just not gravitate right to high performance. These people just want to be better. Therefore, they can lift weights. They can work on speed, agility, quickness, all of those things.
Okay.
That's a very small sample. Let's talk the majority here. Physical training is more difficult because the majority of the people trying to do it, it's because they need to, not necessarily because they want to.
Okay. My response is what I think that you're also not putting into consideration is internally with the mental part. It's not always just wanting to get... I think we have to, it depends on the example. So if we're looking at somebody who just wants to get stronger, then I think that all makes a lot of sense. But for somebody, like I think normal people deal with a lot of different types of stresses. Like if someone deals with anxiety, they have a generalized anxiety disorder, that's very difficult for them to then move. Like it takes a lot for their minds. They have to figure out themselves internally before they actually go out into the world. And that is sometimes what they would rather just be like, just go into the weight room and start doing something or going out for a jog rather than feeling so uncomfortable all the time. Mm-hmm. If you kind of get what I'm saying here.
I do. So what you're articulating there is a classic case in point of the psychophysiological principle.
Yes.
The relationship between the mind and the body. What the mind perceives, the body believes.
I like when you do that. You take my normal human words and you put them into a clinical words.
Well, that's all of that. They call the certificates on the wall and the license.
Eventually,
if you're not,
maybe I'll do that.
If you're not packaging them and putting them into something fancy schmancy, then what's all of the degrees on the wall
worth? The funny part is, from all of those 100 words I said, that one statement was exactly what I said.
No, so. Well, that's you learn that in Boomerville.
Right, I got to get there, Boomerville.
Yeah, it's a one-way ticket though. It's there's no turning back. Once you get to Boomerville, there's no turning around.
I'm getting a little uncomfortable.
As you should, but the psychophysiological principle perceives, believes, head, body. This is the back side of it, though, and a lot of people don't remember this. It can work in reverse, because of what the mind perceives, the body believes. If you change the physical body just through increased heart rate, change in respiration, now those electrical signals from the body go back to the brain.
Uh-oh, bad habits are forming.
Well, no. It's just the opposite. If I'm thinking negatively, I'm going to feel negatively. But if I go out and do something and exert myself and feel positively, physically, I start to think positively.
I was thinking negatively, of course.
Right. So to the very point.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to build for you is a bridge. Mm-hmm. While each of us have our perspectives as to what might be more difficult to achieve, certainly to sustain, there's eventually a bridge between the two. And I think that's the overarching emphasis that we can make as it relates to mind training, mental, body training, physical, and which one is it? Let's get back to the NBA. I'm not going to let you off the hook. Ben Simmons,
right?
Sports psychologist. and he went public. What's your take on that?
It's funny that like I had a few people send it to me. One, like, ooh, look, this is
look.
this is what you want to do. And
Right.
I'm like, oh, thanks, guys.
This should be really good for your industry.
Yeah.
Make sure you like it. Make sure you send it all your friends.
It's like, yeah, no, of course it's good for the industry, but as far as Ben Simmons go, I don't think it's a new thing. I think he's had a sports psychologist for about 2 years now, at least. And it's interesting because it's so, what he was struggling with was so clear, and it was confidence. Now, where does that play into mind and body is the next question. Obviously, we know it's mind, but that affected, to your point, how he's actually performing now.
Well, let's define confidence first, and then we can see how it fits into mind and body.
Okay.
Confidence is defined in a sport, in a performance arena, as the belief that you have a skill set required to engage in a particular activity when
Yeah.
it's needed. It's a belief. That's what confidence is. It's not a feeling. It's a belief. It then leads to what people, onlookers, fans, will say, wow, he's so confident. She's just rock solid confident on the balance beam. Look how calm she is. It begins cognitively. Confidence is a belief set of skills that you have got what it takes and you can retrieve them and implement them as needed. I don't think Ben Simmons truly felt ever, because of his raw talent,
Right.
that he could make a three-pointer as well as he could run the floor, assist the basketball. It quickly became something in his repertoire at whatever particular reason and whatever particular time in his life that he de-emphasized. He devalued it, therefore he stopped working on it. So that mental belief led to the physical example. What the mind perceives, the body believes. So when we would watch him take a shot that was, well, I think the statistic that I heard, and it's a little fuzzy, but over the 500 shots that he took prior to this year, maybe it was just last year, 8 of them were behind the arc or outside of 16 or 18 feet.
Yeah.
Okay?
I think it's pretty accurate.
Right. It's a very, very small sample size.
Okay, so you're Ben Simmons, and you lack this confidence. I'm going to be Patrick Mahomes, who had the raw talent, you should say. He was playing baseball. He got drafted for baseball. And he has this, I don't want to say false confidence, but he had something that allowed him to get to the potential he could have been. Is that how powerful this thing called confidence is?
For sure. I think not only is an example of how powerful it can be, but I think it also can take your game to astronomical levels. A lot of people don't remember this, and they won't. The same way that a lot of people don't remember that Tom Brady, in some of his Super Bowls that he won, was not his very best version. A lot of people have already forgotten Patrick Mahomes was not particularly good in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He was slightly above average. His one long pass that he made was grossly underthrown. It just so happens that his receiver was completely wide open on a busted coverage. Did he make plays with his feet? Of course. And this is not a criticism of Patrick Mahomes. It speaks to the larger influencer of performance anxiety on the grandest stage of them all, impacting what most would call big-time game confidence.
Right. Something that I really saw about him that kind of changed my viewpoint on him in general was last year so we have these two young quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. Lamar Jackson, who's doing really well, he got put into a little pickle, was down by a lot.
And fell apart.
And his emotional intelligence dropped. Or not dropped, but I just saw that his emotional intelligence was just not there yet.
Yeah.
On the contrary,
He became one-dimensional.
Right. He did fall apart, to your point.
He did.
Patrick Mahomes, same situation. I was watching it like, ooh, let's see what's going to happen. I'm comparing. And he executed. Like, well, very well. And that's what kind of got, now his radar started flashing. Like people are like, okay.
Yeah, is he different? Is he special?
Right. What
right?
is he special? I think is like the key word.
Right. And the answer appears to be yes. But again, one more piece to that puzzle that we're going to remove, which might make it a little bit more difficult for us to see big picture. I don't know who it was, but someone from the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe it was a lineman, went on record about a week ago that the Kansas City Chiefs, in anticipation of this football season, who knows if they actually have one, is going to win 6 or 7 more Super Bowls.
I think he counted too. I'm not going to win 1, 2, 3,
Right.
4, 5.
And that reminds me of LeBron James when he went off to Miami
Right.
with Chris Bosh.
They said the same thing.
Right, and they came up out of
Yeah.
the floor, and it was the announcement. He's like, we're not going to not win 1, but 2, but 3, but 4.
Yeah.
So if you think about why he said 7, why do you think this guy from the Chiefs said 7? What is that one more than?
Tom Brady.
Correct, who has 6. So Patrick Mahomes, I believe, is 24.
Yes, he's my age. Look at the difference.
Has a $500 million contract, plus the anticipation that he is going to become the greatest quarterback in the history of the game, as it is dictated by number of championships, to exceed the current GOAT, Tom Brady, who's established that over 20 years. And is this Patrick Mahomes' upcoming 4th year in the league, I believe?
I think it's his upcoming 4th.
Yes, upcoming 4th,
Yes.
right? So at roughly 20%, 1/5 of the way in to Tom Brady's length of career, Patrick Mahomes has a $500 million and the expectation to win 7 Super Bowls. Do you think it's at all possible that Patrick Mahomes at some point may endure some level of mental fatigue?
Absolutely.
So we're going to find out exactly how much raw talent, how he practices. We're just going to call that, for the discussion for the purpose of this discussion, deliberate practice.
Yeah.
His effort and the rate of his exertion through that practice. We're going to take a look at how all of those things over the next 5, 10, 15 years, let's hope he stays healthy and he can make it to 20.
Yeah.
Now the evaluation clock starts to see how all of those factors are directly impacted by mental fatigue.
Yes.
And that's why the Patrick Mahomes of the world, not who are presently 24, but are 12, need to start working with performance psychologists, because that's becoming the expectation. That's becoming the new normal.
So to end, when we ask the question, which is more important, training your mind or body, where are we at right now with all of this?
I mean, my fallback position when I don't think about it is obviously it's more important to train your mind, because one, it's not really talked about as much as it should be still, which means it's overlooked more often.
Right.
But I think what it's really about, Jess, is physical skills continue to escalate, but when you get to the highest level, they're relatively the same.
Right. It's like this. Yeah.
So what's the one key factor? Because mental skills has been overlooked, because it has been cast aside, because it hasn't really been considered as an equal to physical skills training, I think the one key difference is mental skills. But unfortunately, it's only going to get the most attention at the elite level. Because in the sports world that we live in, everything needs to begin at the top and then, like a waterfall, slowly trickle down.
Right. So my question that's falling is, I think what you were saying is, like, when you have a 12-year-old, for example, all they care about, if they're a baseball player, is how many home runs am I hitting right now? And
Yep.
what does my stats say?
Right.
So how do we revolutionize that to show, well, what is my mind saying right now? Like, how strong was my mind for this game?
We can look at it in two ways. One, we continue to saturate the industry with a lot of education. The second is find that one pro that's maybe on the cusp of greatness, and after they engage in mental skills training 2.0, like a mindful athlete training, when they discover their bio-cue, starts to talk about it.
I'm almost thinking of Ben Simmons. technically he's on the cusp of greatness.
He is.
And after working with some sort of, I think it was in fact a sports psychologist, and he came out the first scrimmage. Now tomorrow we'll see how this season goes. He came out and he shot 3 3-pointers, and he made 1. And
But yet the conversation has already started of the value of him taking those 3
right.
shots.
It's not that he
And
made
how
any of them.
Exactly. It's the dimension of his game. It's,
Yes.
because now they're commenting about the amount of distance that his defender was giving him when he took those 3 shots, because Ben Simmons was the guy who never took
Right.
3-point shots. So psychologically, his behavior is already starting to impact how he's guarded. And I think that could speak to, one, his mental strength efforts being rewarded, and 2, the impact that that mental strength effort had on how other people approach him mentally.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really, really big for whatever we were talking about today. I think Ben Simmons is our destiny.
Well, he's local.
That could be why I'm considering him our destiny, because
Right.
I technically want him to be, because then that means we win.
Well, it allows us to talk more in our own backyard
Yeah.
about the relevance of this topic. It allows us to continue to take that step behind the 3-point line and
No pun intended.
and get a wide panoramic view of how the athlete can attend to their entire performance. Let's not forget, we are defining a holistic athlete as one who has integrated their systems well, their heart, their brain, their muscles. And the integration leads to an orchestration of nervous system activity. It is simply the best way to compare it, listening to 3 separate instruments and appreciating what it sounds like versus the music that the orchestration of all 3 creates. And I think that's why this conversation is so valuable. That's why the between the lines allows us to really take a look at how we can make a difference, the impact that it can have on those athletes. And then let's just hope, because that's all we can control, let's just hope that the Ben Simmons of the world continue to talk about their own journey, which then makes it safer for everyone else to consider. That very much felt like a mindful minute.
I think it was.
And-
That's
and-
why I let you go.
And I appreciate I appreciate you giving me that freedom, because as I continue to think about how we want to just wrap things up, does life have to be in a bow? Of course not. But sometimes it feels right to package it anyway. So I'm Dr. Lee Piccarello, Jess Ferdinand. Thanks for tuning in, and next time on The Head Game.